Dave Reddin, diolch yn fawr iawn am ymuno â fi fan hyn heddi. Empty seats, poor results, a shortage of emerging talent, and now uncertainty at club level. How on earth are you going to turn all that around?
Well, that's, I guess, inherent in the proposals we try to put forward. Both initially we went out to consultation and then after that what we've announced subsequently. So it's a big challenge. We acknowledge that. There's lots of different facets to it, which is why we've tried to come up with a really comprehensive plan.
We'll focus on the Scarlets and the Ospreys. There was a feeling of injustice, I think, amongst fans in the West. You've said the best solution is one team in the West. Why is that, and why have you decided it should be between the Ospreys and the Scarlets?
So in terms of the data behind it, if you will, I mean, to some extent, we've got to look at lots of different factors, but population is one, number of clubs is another, facilities and educational links. So a combination of those factors led us to believe that that's the right solution.
And what is your preferred option moving forward now? Is it a merger? Is that what you'd like to see happen?
Look, I think lots of things are on the table. Whether it's a merger or some other way of doing that is going to be painful for fans of one of those clubs. If we go to a merger and there's a loss of identity, that's difficult. If one club goes completely, that's also very difficult. I appreciate that.
But do you have a vision in mind? Is there a preferred option for you personally?
Well, I think consent is the option that we'd like. You know, so I think the hardest process for everybody is going to be if we end up in a really protracted process, because at the moment uncertainty is really killing everybody. That's the hardest thing. You know, which club, you know, and when. So achieving some solution through consent is really what we're working hardest at the moment.
But do you think a merger is realistic? Because for some, it's like asking Man United and Liverpool, for example, to join and create one club. It sounds pretty unrealistic.
Yeah, I think potentially. I mean, I know that's been tried in the past and was unsuccessful. So I think it's one option on the table. Look, I think all of the things that we're talking about involve considerable change, and I can completely understand that analogy you've used. You know, two clubs merging would be pretty unpalatable for people. In the same way, if one club ceases to exist, that'd be really unpalatable for people. So we've been faced with tough choices right from the beginning here with this process, and in getting down to three, that's inherent in that. So look, I can't give you one that I prefer. I just prefer that we agree or we get consent in, whichever it is.
You say it's unpalatable, and yet it is a choice, isn't it? That may turn out to be what will happen.
The choice to close one club?
Exactly, yes.
Yes, it might well be. And look, no one wants to be in the position we're in. And I think we said right at the beginning, if there was unlimited money and we had the level of talent in the country to support four teams, then that could have still been an option, but it isn't. We don't have the level of talent to support four teams. We're an outlier in world rugby, actually, in terms of the number of professional clubs at four compared to population. And despite the fact that Wales, I think, is top three in participation per capita, that's not the same as converting all that talent to top talent. And so we had to make some tough choices.
You say you want to come to a solution by consent. What exactly does that mean?
So what it means is that between the four regions, there is an agreement that we can get to three.
But so do you think that's realistic? Do you actually think, because as you said before, when it came to the proposal or the proposition of Scarlets and Ospreys merging, that was described after as being dead.
Yeah.
Do you honestly think that there is potential that the four clubs will come together and come to an agreement?
Well, look, there are conversations that have been going on for some time, so I can't say any more on the nature of those conversations, but that I think everybody recognises that if we can get to an agreement, and it will be difficult, I'm not trying to underestimate that, but that would be the best solution for everybody, because if we don't get consent, then what we then have to do is go out to a tender process, which then takes an awful lot longer, minimum of 6 months. And then, of course, it pushes the decision further back.
And if that were to happen, if the licences do end up going out to tender, would you like Y11, the owners of the Ospreys, to buy the Cardiff franchise?
There's lots of options on the table. So there's
but that would solve a lot of issues for you, wouldn't it? If that were to happen,
it could do. You know, there are lots of possibilities. That's only one. So we don't have a preferred version whatsoever. But that's one possible one.
And if it were to go out to tender, as you say, it would take a long time. That's added chaos, isn't it? It's another sort of unknown in a way on top of what is already quite a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, all of it's very uncertain, and we want to try and shortcut that process as much as possible. It is complicated. As you say, we've got the situation with the clubs, whether that's consent, whether that's tender. In parallel, we've got the conversations with URC and how quickly we can get to 3 teams with them. And then there's the whole transition process as well. So we recognise it's very, very difficult.
And the whole tender process, are you banking on that? And will that definitely happen if it comes to that? Because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do you want or hope all this will happen? And what contingencies are in place if there is no consent or consensus?
So we're working in parallel on all these options. So we don't sort of say we're just going to focus on consent, and then if that doesn't work, we'll go on to tender. In parallel, we've got to prepare for the scenario that we may not reach a consensus. And so all the materials are ready to go so that we don't waste time in that process. And then, in parallel, we'd expect that whatever decisions are made, there might be some challenges along the way. So we're trying to prepare for as many of those variables as possible. Including in that, we've got to be thinking about the players and the staff. So the longer the uncertainty goes on, and if we were to be in a protracted process, then the players' welfare is of most importance. So we're thinking about how we might give them some more security, and also thinking about staff too.
But if it does end up becoming a tender process, do you think that will be the end of it? That will be able to resolve the issues?
Well, yes. I mean, by that stage, then we would have reached the conclusion that we couldn't agree a consensus. That there's now a transparent process
and that would be the end of it.
That would satisfy competition law. Then we would be, trying to execute that, make sure there were enough interested bidders, and then not negotiate with URC in the same time.
So, is that your preferred choice?
It's just one of the options. Our preferred choice is to reach consensus as quickly as possible, because if we can do that, then we can give people certainty much more quickly. We can then get on with the planning process of looking after staff and players.
Are you saying once this whole process is finished that there won't be any professional rugby in one of the 2 rugby heartlands of Swansea and Llanelli?
Well, I think it's that's going to be the case if it's one club there. Yeah, so we're one of those centres now. Semi-professional rugby development centres, all of those other things are important. And look, I think the emotion of the history is important.
I was going to say it's about more than rugby, isn't it? It's identity, it's heritage, and saying there's not going to be professional rugby in one of those 2 places, that'll hurt a lot of people.
100%. And look, I'm not Welsh. I can't sit here and empathise in the same way that someone from Swansea would do if that was the club that was to go, or from Cardiff or anywhere else. I can't do that. But I guess I can empathise how that might feel. And it's a huge decision. If you've been a fan of one of those clubs and it doesn't exist anymore, that's huge. But I think also history teaches us that, we're pretty resilient. When we look back, there have been some changes. There were 22 years ago when we moved to a regional model. And, now we're talking about the history that was created through that regional model. So it's not impossible to adapt. But I acknowledge there's a lot of pain in that process of transition.
And I'd like to ask about the economic effect of closing losing a club as well. Nia is an avid Scarlets fan from Nantgaredig who we've interviewed. She says that losing the Scarlets would destroy the community because there's nothing else in the town, according to her, in Llanelli. Rugby, the club, brings people together and an economy to the area. What would you say to Nia?
I'd agree with her, and there are similar people to Nia all across the country, and so the economic impact of a professional club closing is significant. You recognise the businesses that support and rely on that, the local sponsorships that take care of that. And we're not insensitive to that, but there is a bigger economic issue as well, globally in rugby. And these are really tough decisions. As I said at the start, if there was more money and we could genuinely support all of them, of course we would. But the talent and the global economics don't support that.
The question is, how do you convince someone like Nia of that? Someone she's a 3rd generation Scarlet supporter. How do you convince her that this is for the greater good? Perhaps losing the Scarlets would be for the greater good.
Yeah, I think it's a journey of, I'm not expecting Nia or anybody else immediately to say, yes, of course we agree with you, everything will be okay. I think we've got to be patient with fans. We've got to build something that is going to take some time, but over time they're going to be proud about what the system looks like in the future. Because I think what we have got in Wales is an incredible community game. We've got incredible talent coming through that community game. We're putting a huge amount of investment, it's a generational investment into pathways to really make more of that talent. And then really what that's going to mean for us is we're going to produce more of the top talent in the future, which is going to excite future generations. Now, the tough sell of that is I can't say that's now and I can't say that's next year. And so that's almost the impossible bridge for people. It's, well, what about my loss? And I understand that. And all I can say to that is, we empathise with your loss, and this is what we're trying to do to build for the future.
And people like Nia are also saying that they're turning their back on the national game now as well. She says she doesn't want to put any money in the WRU's coffers because she feels that hurt by what's going on and the potential decisions.
Yeah, it's a
that
huge.
Can't be good.
It's not good, and but where I go back to, we can't solve all of it. I'm sorry, we just can't. This is the advantage of Wales as a rugby system is it's hugely interconnected. And then when we have to make tough decisions like that, of course, the interconnections affect lots of people. So there is no sort of future potential without some short-term pain, I'm afraid. And, I can't shy away from that.
And do you know how long that will take? Because people are also, the uncertainty is around us. People are looking for short-term solutions. I appreciate you said that there are no short-term solutions. It is long-term. But how long will people have to wait until things do improve?
Well, look, I think what I would say is if we go sort of a national team down, it's really exciting to have a new Welsh head coach as coaching our men's team. And I think we're going to see some real identity from that team and some real intention about the way that team plays.
And results?
Well, look, we've started with the toughest of tests in this autumn, so difficult to imagine a more difficult set of fixtures, but that puts a real benchmark down and allows us to say we know where we are. Going into Six Nations with more time to build, then over time we're going to expect better performances. The pathway investments mean that we're going to be able to do better with the talent that we've got. So over the next sort of 3, 4, 5 years, I'm expecting our age group teams, and our academies to start feeding through better talent to our clubs and then to our national team. So they're the sorts of timescales that we're talking about. We can't snap our fingers and suddenly find talent that wasn't there before. We've got to be patient. We've got to look at the history that other nations have been through when they've been through difficult times and how they've rebuilt. And this is a long-term process. Now, I suppose my assumption is the Welsh public may be, if this is a marriage analogy, they're having a difficult moment with the marriage with the national team. They're going through a relationship bump, and I understand that. But I think the love's there, so it's about the long term. And it's up to us, if we're on one side of that equation, to help them find it again. Mm-hmm. And so they're the foundations we're trying to build.
I want to talk a bit about the potential of joining the English Prem. The fans want it. In simple terms, is it a possibility?
Not in the short term, no. And the short term is...
Why not?
Because a number of different reasons. So first and foremost, we're committed to URC. We're a shareholder in URC. It's the competition that we're playing in. Theoretically, even if we wanted to leave, that's not an easy process because we've committed to that league, and that's the league that provides our competitions. On the other side, we would have to have an invite to go to PRL, to go to the Prem. That's not on the table. The Prem is looking to expand, and its first expansion will be through its championship, and that's the commitment that they've made.
But wouldn't that give you, if they're looking to expand, surely that could be a sort of an open door for the WRU and for the regions here in Wales to perhaps put their cards on the table and say, look, we actually are interested in joining you here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's real complexity on all sides, because I think it's, if you think about the partners we've got in URC, the Irish clubs, the Scottish clubs, etc. If we just sort of metaphorically walked away from them, that's not without consequence. We're brothers in arms in the Six Nations. We need to work together with World Rugby. We can't sort of say it's all right, Jack. We're okay. You lot suffer. So the
but
solution.
Doesn't it get to a point where you have to look after the WRU and for the long-term future of the game, going over and playing in England would actually be more beneficial?
I think for us, what we've got to do is work together and think about how do we create better competition structures for everybody, and that's the reality of it. So, I understand everybody, everyone would like to be able to just drive up the M4, M5 and go to those games. I understand that, but that isn't a solution that's available. It's not going to be available in any meaningful time frame. That doesn't mean that we don't understand that. That doesn't mean that some of those options aren't attractive, and we'd love to find a competition solution that works for everybody, that would be, really exciting to watch, great TV, would bring away fans in. I think that would be everybody's goal.
I guess it obviously would entail a lot of negotiation if that were to happen, a lot of hard work, but it would be an opportunity to show some real leadership and say, yeah, this is what we want to do, and we're going to try and pursue that for fans, because that's what they want.
Yeah, I understand that. And I suppose what I would say to fans, we're looking at all of those solutions behind the scenes. We recognise the difficulties with the competition, but we have to keep our, we have to respect the integrity of the way that we operate with our partners. And, we're a URC country in a URC competition. That's where we are at the moment. We'll work really hard to improve that competition and do the best we possibly can for Welsh Rugby.
But is it something personally that you would like to see happen?
I'd like to see the competitions elevated, because club rugby's struggling.
Does that mean Welsh regions playing in England? Is that something you would like to see?
I think I've said previously that I think where I think there's an opportunity potentially more in the short term might be around the championship and, the SRC and champ. I think there's some opportunities there. I think we'd love to have some competitions, to conversations to see, are there any creative ideas about end of season playoffs between competitions that might instill some of that? I think just having the conversation, but just to say that there's no magic wand. I understand and I recognise that people say, well, why don't we just play against the English? That would make a lot of sense. There's a load of history behind that as well. There's some great games and some great clubs, but it's not a straightforward process.
But in sort of playing in the championship, as you said, sort of in England and looking at other competitions, is that something you would like to explore?
Yeah, we would. I mean, we've been in touch with the RFU to see if that's something. I mean, and they said, look, probably not in the next 12 or 18 months because of everything they've got going on. But that is something I think they would like to explore in the future.
Okay. If we move on to talent, what exactly is changing under the new proposals, and what does that look like structurally?
Great question. So, I mean, there's a number of different things. So you mentioned talent to begin with. I think one of the big investments we want to put in, which is about 800,000 a year, is in a department that's responsible for talent and understanding talent. We don't have it at the moment. There's no one I can point to at WRU who understands talent right across the system, but by which I mean all the way from sort of under 14 all the way to the top, inside and outside Wales. So as a small nation with limited talent, we must understand our talent. We must understand where it is, how good it is, what its potential is, as well as what it's performing like at the moment, and therefore where to devote our resources.
Because as you will know, good players are leaving for England already.
Yes.
And the time, we go back to the time frames again, how soon can this happen?
Well, there's a number of if we can get agreement, that we can go a lot faster. There are still things like the talent and insight department and some of the other central investments we can do anyway, and they would work on behalf of the system, probably independently of any agreement. And for things like that, there's broad support from the clubs that would be a really good initiative to try and tie things together. The pathway investments we've spoken about. But just to reiterate, we're looking to move away from a model of 4 regional academies to 2 regional training centres, and that's a concentration of talent, so fewer people but much more resources to make that a really elite development environment. And then beneath that, the player development networks are 12 centres across the country. That's a huge investment. That's a generational investment of sort of 2.78 million a year in full-time coaches at that level.
I was going to get on to the coaches, actually. Shouldn't there be a focus on developing new coaches as well?
Absolutely. I mean, so 2 things there. Yes, we've committed as part of the proposals to put a significant amount of additional money into coach development all the way through the pathway. But then specifically around that sort of 14 to 18 age group, those player development centres, on the men's side, that's 24 roles we'll need to find, or people will need to find, or people will need to train, because We want real high quality talent, people who are experts in developing players, recognising talent at that age group. And that's a significant investment that doesn't always won't make the headlines. It's not as emotive as the sort of 4 clubs or 3 clubs, but generationally that makes a massive difference. And there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah, will this extra funding be enough to sort of revitalise the rugby brand amongst young people?
Yeah, look, I hope if we take the player development centres as an example, the ability to access really high quality coaching experience in your local area, being able to look up and see there's a pathway there through competitions with quality coaching all the way through, that there's an SRC club with additional investment in coaching and support services that's maybe at a bit of a higher level than we are at the moment, and then look up again and say, okay, if I could get into the National Academy, then I've got a chance of, getting a professional contract. So that's the sort of thing I'm hoping will inspire people.
But what about sort of, those who are 7, 8 years old, really at the grassroots? Football is the #1 sport in Wales at the moment. How are you going to entice those 7, 8-year-olds to play rugby instead of football?
Well, so I guess that's through a combination of things. We want successful clubs, professional clubs, and so the choices we've made to go to 3 teams with an elevated wage cap means that we can afford better talent, and that would be Welsh talent and non-Welsh qualified talent.
Is that really going to affect on those who are just sort of starting?
I do think if you think back through the history of Welsh clubs, when a Jerry Collins was here, or now we've got Lewis is the great hope as well. Those are inspirational characters for young players in my experience. And yes, people gravitate towards teams, but they also gravitate towards personalities and players. And I think you mentioned football. That's a very prevalent piece as well. I'm not saying exclusively so, but the younger generation are probably more attracted to the personality than they are to the club in some respects. So I think the talent is part of that.
But isn't it a matter of investment, though? And really, pushing rugby and giving children that age the opportunities.
So as I said, there's two sides of it. The talent is, if you like, the inspiration, and then I think the investments at the level in play development centres also affect the schools. So the full-time coaching staff in those play development centres will also have a role to support the schools. That makes rugby more represented. Hopefully, the quality's better. It's more exciting. So there's a whole network of effects there that I think can help.
You mentioned earlier that you're not Welsh, and that may sort of anger some people. And one criticism that I've heard consistently over the past few weeks is that there is a lack of understanding within the leadership of the WRU of Wales and Welsh rugby. David, an Ospreys fan from Seven Sisters, he says he thinks you and your colleagues don't understand our society, our traditions, nor how to get the best out of our communities. Is that a fair criticism?
Look, I can't answer that in totality. I'm not capable of understanding Welsh communities and Welsh people in the same way that Welsh people will.
But your comments haven't helped, have they? I'm not focused on what happened when who beat the All Blacks 40 years ago. I don't look back. I'm looking forwards. And you've also asked people to let go of the emotion and sort of cold-bloodedly analyse the situation. This is Wales. We're an emotional people. We use our past to form our culture. And your reluctance to do that gives the impression that you don't understand and that you don't care.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression I don't care. Look, I think what I can bring to it is some empathy for the emotion that goes with it and a respect for the communities. But, frankly, if I was to try and satisfy everyone's emotions and try and deal with that, we would never make any tough decisions.
Do you think it's better to be unemotional about it? It is a business at the end of the day.
I think in my role, I have to acknowledge the emotion but not make decisions by it. It's not a black and white line, because if we get that totally wrong and you completely break the emotional link, people just will vote with their feet and they won't come. But at the same time, if that's all I listen to, then we won't make the right decisions for the future. And look, we're always going to be judged by the decisions we make in the future. These aren't short-term things that are going to fix something tomorrow. These are changes for the future. What I do here is the big emotion around the clubs, and I understand that. And I'm not trying to. I think some of the comments have been almost characterised as dismissive of the history of clubs and it's not important. It's not to say it's not important. There were amazing achievements with clubs beating New Zealand and touring teams, incredible. But it happened a long time ago, and that doesn't mean that that's going to be repeated. Doesn't mean we should ever forget it. Doesn't mean those clubs should cease to exist. Maybe they change their form or exist in a different form. That history is always there. But if we don't evolve, if we don't move forwards, then we can be anchored to our past rather than building upon it.
I guess the worry is though that we're moving too far away from that, from what was a very successful era. What was great about rugby back in those days, and we've moved too far away from that, and you're the architect of that.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to convince everybody that it's the right way. You might say, look at other sports, look at football, and there was no Premier League, and there were clubs that had won the Premier League, and then they're nowhere to be seen now. That that it happens in sport, and they. In other sports, there's an equal amount of history. There are clubs in Wales that were right at the top table when it was a much more expansive club game, and they're not anymore. So change is a constant. It always will be. So I absolutely don't mean any disrespect. I acknowledge I will never understand it in the same way that Welsh people will. But the commitment I have is I do hear it, and I'm not immune to it. But equally, I think if I listen too hard to that, we'll never take the tough decisions.
And it's about building bridges, obviously, with fans as well, and that can be difficult, as we've already established. You may be aware of a survey that was conducted on the rugby website Gwlad. There were some 1,300 respondents. 90% of those respondents said they don't think the WRU is doing a good job. And 85% said they don't think the executive board is qualified to make big decisions about the future of the game. There is a lack of trust and faith there.
Yeah.
How are you going to repair it?
I think the way you prepare, you repair that is by what you do and what people see going forwards. So, look, I'm aware. I think governing bodies generally have a tough job. I've seen that across other sports in other nations.
Those figures are quite startling, aren't they?
They are, but I think when you're in a period of change and when you've been in a period of lack of success, it's natural that people are going to feel like that. And my experience is also that sentiment can change. Now, change is only going to happen through people. It's not going to happen through me sitting here talking to you and talking words. It's going to happen through people seeing something different in their local community, in their player development centre, and ultimately on the pitch. And so that's not going to happen overnight. And so it's not as simple as saying, just trust us, everything will be okay. That sounds like politicians. What I think we have to say is, look, this is what we're planning on doing, and we'll get after it and do that as well as we possibly can. And that's what we get judged on.
Do you get how it can be unpalatable for people because you've got a very impressive CV. That's why you're here, to do the work you're doing. But you can move on. The fans will still be here. Whatever the decisions, whatever the effects of those decisions are, the fans will be the ones who will have to deal with those. You can trot off into the sunset.
Of course I can, but I think that's true with anybody working in the game, isn't it? I mean, anybody, Welsh or otherwise, who's working in Welsh rugby has the choice, and there's been some stellar Welsh talent that's gone and worked elsewhere afterwards, right? So I think what that suggests is that I don't care about it. I've got a professional pride as well. I want to do a good job. I came here because of the challenge, not because it was going to be easy.
And you are determined to see that through.
I'm committed to making it work. Yeah, I want to get to a solution that's going to be, the best possible solution we can make it for the future of Welsh rugby. But I think if we end up in a compromise or where we've been previously, that's bad for everybody, and that's the last thing I want to see.
Just a couple of generic questions just to end. The WRU have said they want full control of rugby matters when it comes to the regions. Why not pursue full control of the commercial side as well?
Well, I guess on balance, there's a couple of reasons for that. I think that the rugby stuff is the stuff that we think by helping people collaborate and align better, we can get most value from. And I think probably commercially, working inside a club, those sort of things are best done by entrepreneurial individuals rather than bigger organisations. And so that partnership, I think, can be very powerful. We've seen that work well in New Zealand and other places where there's a model similar to the one that we've proposed. So, there have been discussions in the past about owning all of it or running all of it. But on balance, we think the partnership with private investors and people with a real commercial acumen is the right answer.
Okay. You said you want to get to the position where there are 3 teams by the end of this season. That's 7 months away. Is that really going to happen?
I think the ambition is to get to a decision about 3 teams by then, and then we've got a plan of how quickly we can actually execute that. So the parallel process is with the league, with the URC. When could they accept 3 teams in? And that's not entirely our decision or their decision. They've got shareholders to work with and competition structures to work out. So it will be a challenging timeline. You know, I think if we were being more realistic, it might be that it's the end of the following season that we actually get to 3. But we're going to, in the meantime, work as hard as possible to do it as early as possible.
So the decision, ideally, by the end of this season, and then the actual implementation of that by the end of the season.
Yeah, because everyone wants to know, don't they?
Well, so it creates uncertainty, doesn't it? For players, for fans, for everyone.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing I think on everyone's lips. I think with uncertainty, you know, there's a lot of complexity that goes with that. So that's what we're trying to resolve as quickly as possible.
Is it fair to say that you have a plan, but there is so much uncertainty, you do not know exactly how you will get there?
It's fair to say there are lots of paths to getting, there are lots of routes to getting to where we want to get to, so the plan's complicated. Yeah, and I suppose it's really getting to that decision point as quickly as possible, making sure the league understand and agree with the timeline of that. Then you can really get out and execute it. So there's a lot of complexity between now and there, but we're working hard night and day to try and get there.
Is it not best to set specific deadlines instead of sort of see how it plays out?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the process we're going through with the clubs, we'll be being pretty clear about when we want to reach the end of a consent process, when we want to start to launch that tender, because we need that timeline to expedite the negotiations. We don't want to be in this process a bit like PRA, where it goes on for 12 or 18 months, because that's really unhelpful for everybody. So those deadlines are important.
Mm-hmm. But the uncertainty is obviously something you don't want, but it's unavoidable.
At the present time, unfortunately, it is, because we can't unilaterally just force people in private businesses to change, and nor do we want to. So the first step is, can we get through this process to reach a consensus? Let's go hard after that. If we can't do that, we're straight into the tender process. That'll have an end date, so that will provide some clarity for people. In the meantime, we'll have to put some things in place to create some stability for players and staff. And everyone's working as hard as possible to resolve this, because we all recognise the current situation is really harming everybody.
And finally, your message to fans like Nia, like David, what would you say to the fans?
I'd just say, please give us a chance. You know, I know it's difficult. I know it's emotional, and I'm sorry that's the case. But genuinely, I think what we're trying to propose is the future of Welsh rugby and in the best interests of Welsh rugby. So stick with us, get behind us, and then we can all make it a success.
Dave Reddin, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much.
Thank you.